Yeah, can you go? All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining my session. I will start by telling you a little bit about myself and about the reason for this session. So my name is Evellen Schut. I am a project manager or Scrum Master for GoGorilla, and we're based in the Netherlands. I've been working for them for 4 years, and I think that was also the first time I ever experienced open source. I didn't even know what it was before that. But since then, I'm really a part of the community. Even though I'm no code writer, I do like to share some knowledge and contribute in that way. I also tried to contribute some translations. They were never accepted, so maybe that's not my thing. But so this is my way of contributing back. And I hope I can share you some lessons of one of our projects. Because 1.5 years ago, we started out with OpenSocial. OpenSocial is a Drupal 8 distribution. And I've been working almost full-time on this project. And well, I'm a Scrum Master. I'm really into Scrum and the methodology. And this project was really interesting because it's the first time we ever did like an internal project. And so you can really test all the things that Scrum is prescribing, because you all know when you work with customers, you cannot really follow the methodology. You have to adapt to the customer. But this project made it possible to really test the method and to see what we can learn from it and maybe reuse it in our clients' projects as well. Also a cool thing is that before OpenSocial, we worked on bigger projects, but the teams were mostly about 6 people. And we never really experienced troubles with the size of the team. But we all know, at least I have read about Scrum prescribing teams not being bigger than 9 people. But we really didn't have any experience. Why shouldn't it be bigger than 9 people? What is the problem? What do you run into? So with OpenSocial, we did run into a few problems. And I'm going to take you in this session through the Scrum process, and in every event I will explain, okay, what should be the goal of Scrum, what did we run into, and at the end I will also explain you how did we solve these problems, how did we handle these bigger team sizes. So I think we started with OpenSocial in January 2016. We started with 7 people, and because we wanted to move faster, we just added more developers basically, just because that was where we had the most work to do. So we kept on adding developers, and in October 2016, we had about 12 people in a team, which was mostly developers. We had 6 back-end developers, we had 1 front-end developer, and we had 3 design principles, so interaction designer, graphical designer, and also a user, user testing expert. But 12 people in one team, well, you can imagine, if you all are a bit familiar with Scrum and backlogs, that it was like enormous sprints. We had sprints of 3 weeks, and there were like, I think we had 300 points in a sprint. And it was about like 75 stories, so it was an enormous list. And I think this is like the base of all the problems actually that were leading to the next slides. So because you have like a sprint backlog of 75 issues, the goal of a sprint is that you have to know all the sprint issues, and every person in the sprint has to know them. But you can imagine with 75 stories in a sprint, it's like kind of hard to know every single detail in one sprint. So before the sprint starts, what we usually do is we plan refinement sessions, because in these refinement sessions, we talk to the product owner and maybe some other stakeholders. And really the goal of a refinement session is to understand the problem. So the product owner is giving us a problem that we might have to solve, or he has some goal that he wants to reach. So really the goal is of a refinement session is to all ask questions to the product owner, because that's the moment where you can do it if things are still unclear or maybe you have some questions which the product owner still needs to focus on before we can actually add it to the sprint. Maybe he has to do a little bit more research. So it's actually a session where you have to ask all your questions, and everybody of the team should be there because you're going to build it. So you have to know what you're going to build and why you're going to build it. So you can imagine with 12 people, and I think we also all have very strong opinions. So there was like endless discussions. So how we solved it with this big team was just to create like focus groups, or just take at least a few developers, not all 6, but at least 3 maybe, and maybe a few graphical people, but not all. So we were like really mixing these meetings, and we tried to rotate it, but in the end nobody was always in the same meeting because it was impossible. And another way we solved is that at least when the sprint began and these stories were in the sprint, we would schedule extra intake meetings with the people who are going to work on it. So it was kind of, this is how we solved it while we're still in a 12-people team. Well, actually the same problems arise during sprint planning, because what's the goal of a sprint planning? It's again, product owner explaining, this is my main focus, these are my goals for the sprint. And next up, the team should go through stories that comply to the goal, double check everything, is everything clear? If you have to run through a list of 75 issues, you will have endless sprint planning. And what we did was creating subgroups again. And we created subgroups. Sometimes we created because this person has already worked on a feature, so it's more obvious that he would also work on it this sprint. Sometimes we split it because one time it was mainly focused on building features for the distro. Other features were mainly focused on client requests. So we made subgroups in the sprint planning again. We checked all the stories, and at the end of the sprint planning, we came back in one room and we're like, okay, is everything clear? Any more questions? No, and then, the sprint started. So, it resulted, of course, also in the sprint, because, the goal of the sprint is everybody should be working, or can be working on every story. You should know every detail of the story, and you should be able to take over if some person is stuck on a story. You can help him, or you can either take the story that he was planned to do. So you have to be aware of all the stories in the sprint. And if there's too much in the sprint, it's just not possible. At least that's what we experienced. So also at the end, I think, maybe not at the end, I think it started already a bit earlier than October, but we also got complaints from the people that it was hard to focus, because in the beginning of the sprint you were working on a specific area, and then in the middle something else, and so you didn't have any focus in the sprint as well. So developers and also front-enders were kind of complaining about it, I cannot really deliver quality because I have to switch between a lot of different stories, and that's too much. Let's see. So every day we started out with a daily stand-up, and the last question of the daily stand-up is, okay, guys, are there any impediments? Do we need to take something out? Is there anything not going that well? And actually, me as a Scrum Master, I couldn't even have an overview myself, but also the guys were like, I don't really know, maybe not, maybe we can finish it, I don't really have an overview. So it was also always like, okay, let's just wait a few more days and see if anything bad happens, and then make statistics of the sprint, how many stories are still open, what are the estimations. So we had to do almost calculations on a sprint if it was feasible. So we didn't really have a good answer to this question, and it is a very important question, because this is also things that you need to update the product owner about. But we didn't really have it, and a lot of the times it also resulted in a lot of stories not completed in the sprint, but we only noticed it like a day before the sprint ended, so that was also not really working for us. Yeah, and I think also Scrum uses like the burn down chart. I think because we had to work on so many stories, and we also started at a lot of stories at once, we had like this flat line for like maybe half of the sprint, and then stories were about to finish because you're also depending on each other. Developer starts, front-ender needs to do some more work. So that was also like not really feasible, this burn down chart. So we had basically no overview. Then at the end of the sprint, you also have the sprint review. So our goal of the sprint review is to demo the work to the product owner and to also the stakeholders and gather their feedback and see if everything was built like what they expected. But I think because also us not having a lot of collaboration in the sprint, because we had to really work on our own stories to make everything work, and not, you could not collaborate with 6 other developers, so you had your own special area. So for us, the sprint review basically became like an internal knowledge sharing. It was not even like, and also the demos were, instead of really functional, okay, this is what we do, this is the result, but we also had a lot of technical demos. So you can imagine that the product owner, this is not something they will understand, and the stakeholders as well. But we had to do it because we had to update each other. There was no really other way of also first giving internal demos. So we used the sprint review to share knowledge between the team members. And indeed, sometimes this was the first time you ever saw the solution of a few other features that you were not involved with. So I think in October, November, we said, okay, this team is becoming way too big. We cannot handle it anymore. There's no overview. How are we going to restructure it? And it was not like an easy way of, okay, we're 12 people, now we create 2 teams of 12. Because in the Ideal team, you have to represent every discipline. And in our case, we only had 1 front-end designer, so we didn't want to put him in 2 teams because that would also double his meetings and double his focus areas. So that was, for us, we first had to add a few more to our team before we could make the split. And so that's why we already, it took a while before we could split, because you have to have the budget to add more people to your project, and you have to have the capacity, of course. So luckily for us in November 2016, it was the time. And we added 1 extra designer, and we added 1 front-end developer. And we also added a part-time developer who was more going to help out with support, like maintaining, doing module updates, bug fixes. So that made it a total of 15. And out of that, we created 3 teams. The team Shipsters, which are focusing on building the distribution and also building our SaaS product. We have the team Easy, and they are really focusing on the enterprise projects. And I think that is also the most important lesson we learned, because having 1 team working on distribution and customers in 1 sprint, in the end, the customer is always more important. So you would always more focus on the clients, and then the distribution was left behind. So I think that was really important split for us. And we also have a 3rd team, because we also have to market Open Social. It's also very important. But again, it's like a challenge. Do we focus on clients? Do we focus on distribution? Do we focus on features? Do we also have to market? And I think in our case, the marketing department always was the lowest priority, and this resulted in them getting their own team, their own developers, and we have a website, getopersocial.com, which they fully develop and maintain and make sure our product is marketed in the right way. So now each team has its own responsibility, and that's working pretty okay. We're still in some discussions if we should also split the distribution in SaaS. But I think there's the same problem there. The team is too small yet. We cannot split because we don't have these disciplines represented twice, so it's really hard to split it. But I think we'll do it as soon as it can. So I think if you hear my story, it all comes down to the same thing. I think your team becomes too big whenever you feel and you see that you're creating subgroups within your team. And it sounds really simple, but I think we just had to experience before we are actually okay with, 9 is definitely, even 9 is a bit much already, because I think Taras is in the easy team. They're already growing now, and you're experiencing the same problems already. So, but we're learning now, and I think we're trying to adapt a bit faster on these issues. There's also we're now talking about when is it too big? I was talking on DrupalCon Dublin, and I was talking about multidisciplinary teams, and they already asked me, okay, what is the ideal team size for you guys? What is the biggest size that you can handle? But I think there's also the question about what is the smallest team size that you can handle, or that you need in terms to really work in a Scrum way. So. I think there's not one answer to that question, but I think at least a Scrum team should be able to conquer also holidays, and should not be like if one person goes on holiday, there needs to be pulled another one into the team, or it cannot work at all. It's just so ideally you should have like disciplines represented double, and in some disciplines it's pretty hard. But of course, you can also plan a little bit around holidays. So that's, I think, the ideal Scrum team, that you have at least 2 developers, and that people are not working on their own island. They really have to collaborate on all the issues together, so that they really put all their expertises in one feature and make it perfect from all points of view. So that's my story. I'm really curious if you guys have experience with this. So I'm wondering what is your ideal Scrum size, or have you experienced a smaller team size that was not working, or maybe a bigger, or let me know. Or any other questions, of course.
So, if to talk about sharing some experience, I would say that, for example, I'm not sure about 2 persons. So sometimes it's kind of you spending more time on meetings in such a case than on exact development. But if to make things wise, for example, if you have like 2 persons in a team and still want to do something like Scrum, you can cut some unnecessary meetings, but have basic ones. Because as I experienced, even in that project that we kind of leading together, that at least refinement sessions are helpful. For it doesn't matter what kind of team size you have, it really helps everyone to understand, to be on the same page, and that's the point.
Yeah, you should indeed. A smaller team size is not is not bad, but and you can use a lot of like elements from Scrum, because yes, that will also always be useful. And I really like the structure, and everybody knows at what time what happens, what kind of event there is, and yeah. But in case of collaborating with each other and covering for each other within a team, I think, I understand why Scrum prescribes a team of 5 people would be also a minimum, depending on your disciplines in a team.
Maybe some other questions?
Did you have someone like a BA, business analyst, or part-time person? And in this case, I mean, not part-time, but rather about BA. So how do you include someone like BA into the sprint?
A PA?
Yes.
What do you mean with a PA?
Business analyst.
Oh, a BA, oh, sorry. Well, at GoGrally, we don't have this specific discipline. I think there are some, we basically handle everything with our developers, and one developer has certain skills, and so, yeah, you need this in the team, but we don't have a specific role for it. We actually, handle this by our developers.
Okay.
If there is no questions, so maybe we should finish.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Evellen.
Thank you.
Okay, please, photo.
Upside down. Thank you.